Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much to the HI team for having my colleagues and I here from the Island Institute in Maine. It's surely wonderful to make the trip and to be so inspired by the scale of what you're all doing here in Scotland. So in reflecting in Sarah's piece, I think about the word resilient and how we use it in our organizational speak and how we write about it in grant proposals. But really, when I think about my work in the word resilient, one person comes to mind. A good friend of mine, her name is Winnie Murdoch. She lives on Mohegan Island, 12 miles off the coast of Maine. She is a small business owner. She runs a small inn out on the island. She's the wife and mother of several lobstermen from the island, and she helps to run those businesses as well. She's an active member of the community, helping to manage the school board, has at various points in time been on the town council, and has been very active in discussions about the future of this island's energy systems and the offshore wind projects that have been proposed just in their backyard. She's a mother, a wife, a grandmother. She actively cares for her grandchildren who are in her care at this point. She has dealt with personal physical health issues, significant physical health issues within her family, addiction, and even loss of a child. Winnie is somebody who just keeps going. She gets up, she does the right thing, she shrugs it off, and quietly she is a change maker. But these aren't words that Winnie would use to describe herself. She's not going to go around telling you that she's resilient and that her community is resilient and she's a change maker. She's going to describe herself as a mom. She's going to describe herself as a wife, and she's going to tell you where she's from, Mohegan Island. So I think the framework, the introduction around community resiliency is so important for all of us as community development practitioners. Frameworks are sort of like the tools we can carry around in our superhero toolkit as community development workers. We basically have the opportunity to sit within communities and to listen to the stories that are being told and the problems that are being discussed and the solutions that are being proposed. And for us to try to make the connections between the values and norms that Sarah outlined in her presentation, how can we maybe help to make a connection between two issues? How can we maybe support work in a particular area of these frameworks? But I think that it's important to make sure that we're applying these in real time with real people and not necessarily out of a textbook. And I think you're hearing great examples of how that's being done here today. So I come from the state of Maine in the U.S. It is actually considered the most rural state in the United States. We have just about 1.3 million people, and roughly 63% of those people live outside of what we consider population centers of 2,500 people or more. We have the oldest population by average age in the entire nation. We have a declining population. We have a number of challenges that are not that are oftentimes seen in rural areas. Even still, our state policy has not adapted to those realities. When it comes to economic development, transportation, or energy, any number of issues, we are seeing at a state level how the more populated areas of our state are routinely privileged over the more rural parts of our state. Nationally, the data we do have reflects the disempowerment that you heard Sarah talk about. We have higher rates of poverty, lower levels of education attainment, and higher energy costs and other costs of living. We are at a point where rural communities in the United States are being left behind. And we actually have a president in office right now who has basically built off of that discontent and made promises to turn things around. This is a big issue that is affecting not just the rural areas, but at this point, our entire nation. So as a community development organization, we feel like we're in a position to try to help fill in the gaps where policy is leaving communities behind. We start always by listening and hearing about that lived experience and definitely respecting Sarah's path towards realizing every community is going to take their own way to do things. We partner with communities to make investments in their own businesses. We have an incredibly entrepreneurial population. More than 60% of some of our communities are self-employed. And so there's a very big entrepreneurial spirit to go out and solve problems and to make opportunities for people. We have the privilege of partnering with small businesses, investing in them, helping them to get off the ground. We also are doing what we can to help make investments in the physical infrastructure that's either non-existent, crumbling, or incredibly inexpensive for these communities, partnering with communities to find ways to address energy, broadband, transportation, and the effects of sea level rise. But I think one of the things we're most excited to talk about while we're here today is what we call civic infrastructure, the relationships that connect us with our lived experience. Maybe it's the soft infrastructure that Sarah was referring to. Finding ways to give voice to people that are on the ground making a difference every day and amplifying their stories through publications, videos, events, and most importantly, through in-person interactions with each other. We've had the great privilege at the Island Institute to build relationships across the United States with island and remote communities, ranging from the Chesapeake Bay, the Outer Banks, small villages in Alaska, Hawaii. The Great Lakes have islands in them too. And we're doing a lot to try to learn from these places in addition to continuously networking our own coast to become more resilient. My colleague Rob and I had the pleasure of speaking to a colleague on Harker's Island in the Outer Banks off of the Carolinas a few weeks ago, and she was telling us about the efforts of her island, which has been getting really hit by sea level rise, but especially with the storms and the hurricanes that have been hitting the east coast of the US in the last few years, and the multi-million-dollar projects she's trying to lead to rebuild from the ground up her community having been ravaged by the hurricanes. And we said, Karen, we know this change and disruption is coming to us. We want to be prepared to be able to deal with it. We want to learn from you about how you're rebuilding and what we'll need to do when it's our time. And she said, you guys already know how to do it. You guys are connected. You know each other. You know who to turn to when you have a problem. You can call somebody on the neighboring island. You can call to the state capitol. You can call to the Island Institute. You are connected. You are networked. And that is what is making you resilient. So to me, that just reflects more of one of the pieces that I love, Sarah, so much about your definition, the evolving definition of resilience. The idea of proactive human agency in a time of constant change is really what we're seeking to do before the disruption, before the disaster. And we're hopeful that we can learn from all of you here today, build those networks, and make not just a networked coast along the coast of Maine and within the US, but globally as well. Thank you.